Before we get started, if you're an entrepreneur or creator, you know how much time creating content takes. For founders and funders, our secret weapon is Riverside's AI co-creator. It's a lifesaver. It automatically finds the best parts of long-form interviews and creates social media clips, which is crucial for online discovery. It saved us hours of editing time to streamline your own workflow and focus on what you do best. Check out Riverside. I put the link in our show notes for you. Welcome to Founders and Funders. This week I have Gabriel Bastien-Dietrich.
Almost. It's Gabriel Bastien-Dietrich.
And he's brand manager here at Nautica Australia. And before we get into the exciting work that you've done here, we're going to go back to the beginning. It's also really exciting to have someone who sounds like me on the podcast. So let's go back to the beginning. Where did you grow up?
So I grew up in the Laurentides, which is about 45 minutes north of Montreal. Yeah. Ski slopes. So every day after school, I would be plucked on the ski slope for a few hours. That's where I grew up.
Yeah. So for people who aren't familiar with Canada, Quebec is very different than the rest of Canada. What were your early childhood experiences like growing up there?
Yeah. I guess it's very different because we all speak French. So the first thing is adjusting to a different culture, especially when you leave. My family didn't have much. They were what we called late hippies.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of self-reliance. And I think I was very lucky that my family was quite well-to-do. So I had a lot of aspiration. And that's probably why I was attracted to fashion so much.
Yeah. What were you spending your free time doing?
Look, it's a bit left field, but I was obsessed with weapons.
Why?
And so my first collections as a kid, probably as a teen rather, it was weapons, guns, BB guns, pellets, weapons. And I have no idea why. I don't have a single bone of meanness in my body.
Yes.
I did fencing at school, so that was probably part of it. But that's my earliest recollection of collecting things.
Yeah. What did you end up studying and what was your first job?
Yeah. I was really good at school, so I wanted to do medicine. I started to do international studies, which was a gateway to medicine. And then I went to Paris for a little trip.
Let's go back. Wait, we didn't answer your first job.
Oh, sorry, my first job? Yes, sorry.
So what did you study and what was your first job?
Well, I'll start with my first job.
Yeah.
First job was in high school. My uncle, who was also my godfather, had a construction company. So I did an apprenticeship in carpentry in Edmonton. So I learned how to speak English, mostly swearing first. And then I was really lucky because he was a bit of a collector and very much of a man about town. He had a wonderful collection of exotic cars and also an incredible wardrobe. So I remember going back to school after spending the summer in Edmonton and looking at my classmates and asking them how come they didn't know what Gucci was. So it was a very good early education on the finest things in life.
And then what did you study?
So I was lucky enough, or worked hard enough to be really good at school. I wanted to do medicine. I started university in international studies. And the first summer break, I went to Paris for a holiday. I ended up doing an internship at Christian Dior, Christian Dior Men, and that's when Hedi Slimane did his first collection, the one that Karl Lagerfeld lost 100 pounds to be able to fit into. So that was the very beginning of like the skinny suit. So I was hooked. Absolutely.
How does someone land an internship in Paris in the summer?
I think it's when you're a traveler, you're so open to everything. I went by myself. It was obviously not the goal. I was supposed to go meet a friend in Greece and to do some backpacking, like as you do. And I wanted to visit all the best places, and I met people that knew people that knew people, and ended up staying there for maybe half a year, did an internship, And then 9/11 happened, and I came home. And then I changed my field of study from international studies to business, and I specialize in fashion.
What were some of the most important lessons you learned during your time in Paris?
It's really to be open. I'm obviously not from Sydney. I've been here for 15 years, but I still live like a tourist. And I think that to wonder about everything is the biggest thing, because that's how you can seize opportunities. That's how you meet new people. That's how you look at things differently.
Yeah. So you changed your studies, and what did you do when you finished your studies?
I got a job. So one of my colleague, co-student, had applied to a bunch of roles, which I haven't done yet. And was already hired when another company accepted, and they offered him a contract. Because he couldn't take it, he got in touch with me. So I met with these two incredible women. They were twice my age, and they were looking for an assistant. We were selling kind of not great women's wear, let's put it this way. It was not very exciting in terms of the product that we did. However, I was exposed for the first time to the internals of wholesale, the logistics, the pricing, importing, exporting. We traveled across Canada to small regional towns or big centers and set up showroom in a hotel suite. So it was a really great formative time.
Yeah. And then how did that bring you to Australia? What happened?
I mean, the reason why I came here is slightly different. I really dislike winter.
Same.
Yeah, despite the fact that you work in fashion and it's good for layering and outfitting. I like to say that I'm a climate refugee.
Okay.
Maybe not a very good joke at the moment, but I just really disliked winter. And I think winter didn't like me either.
Okay.
So it was a mutual thing.
And how did you land here?
When I came to Australia, I was on a work and holiday visa, which is always very challenging because you can't work for the same employer for more than 6 months. My partner had a long-standing visa, so I applied at a role here at True Alliance. My first job was as a sales rep for Ben Sherman.
Okay.
And again, it was fantastic. It was a bit similar to when I was in Canada, where they gave me a petrol card, and a map of New South Wales, and then they let me go.
Okay.
So I've learned so much about the culture of Australia outside of big urban centers. And it really helped me to understand all the difference and small variation between different states and different cities and things like that.
Yeah, what are some of the major differences that you noticed from your time in Canada, where we have 4 seasons to very mild climate here in New South Wales relative to Canada?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, let's just say that the first time I bought shorts in Australia, my underwear were longer than the shorts themselves. So it was the first time in my life I showed my knees in public. In Canada and North America, we wear Bermudas mostly. So that probably is the first thing that shocks everyone when they get here. Seems for a North American like people are walking around almost naked. But that being said, the climate here and the way people dress is much more homogenic than we can see in America. The difference in style between Melbourne, Sydney, and Brisbane is not as great as you would see between New York and Miami, for example, which helps a lot when you work in fashion.
Right. So how did a big brand like Nautica adjust to having multiple season clothing to Australia, where it's a different style, aesthetic? Like, how did that reconcile with their operations and their collection?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably one of the biggest challenge of international brands establishing themselves onto a different country. It helps to explain the difference between what distribution is versus licensing. So distribution is a business model where a third-party company would buy essentially stock at cost from, we call it brand principal, so the brand custodians, and then sell it back onto the market, either to other retailers or direct to customers. So that's a classical distribution business model. And then you have licensing, which is when a third-party company like the one I work for, True Alliance, has the license for a brand, which means that they can design their own clothes using the intellectual property of Nautica in this example. So what we were able to do here is to leverage that licensing to create clothes that are very much Nautica, but adapted to the Australian market. And how that translated, that's why I told you that example about shorts, that wouldn't work in Australia. So in here, for example, all the swims, and probably what I'm wearing is a good example, is a completely different fit and a different silhouette that you would find in North America.
Right. So what are some of the projects you came up with, given this freedom to be working under licensing? Like what kind of projects have you done?
I mean, it's very exciting to be able to do that. The first one was when I took over Nautica, the demographic was quite old. So it was a bit of an old man's brand. However, everything that related to vintage was really, really popular. General Pants was, remember churning VB bucket hats and that sort of stuff. And then up shops were the place to source your clothes. So what we did and what we were able to do is to collaborate with General Pants, revisit the Nautica archives, and then to create clothes that were much more sympathetic to what the market was asking at the moment. What that looked like was more androgynous silhouette, bigger size fits, and things like that. So this allowed us to really rejuvenate our customer base because we were able to show Nautica in a different light. Another one that's very much endemic to Australia is a sub-brand that we call Nautica Competition. So Nautica Competition started in 1996 and was a kind of a pro basketball sub-brand. Very much a lot of performance fabric and incredible detailing. This is a brand that no longer existed in America and that I fought really, really hard to revive here. And that's been hugely successful for us on the Australian market. And I don't think it exists anywhere else in the world.
That's amazing. I think a lot of my listeners are full-time employees wanting to quit their jobs because they have an idea. And it's really interesting and really, really cool that you're able to run a new idea through a global brand that makes some decisions that really work locally.
Yeah.
So sustainability right now is a very popular topic. What is Nautica doing in this space?
Yeah, sustainability is very complex. As a licensee, it's hard for us to control the supply chain. And True Alliance as a company have always been very worried of greenwashing sustainability claims. So Zachary Brook, our head of sales, whenever he would go to Upshop and mention that he works for Nautica, was treated like a rock star. We discovered that there was a huge appetite for a secondhand market in our clothes. So the idea was that because we can't really control where it's made as much as how it's made, we decided to make it last longer. So there's been a really strong approach on quality. And one of the changes we do, for example, is a t-shirt, a t-shirt typically from America would be 160 GSM, which is gram per square meter, the weight of the fabric. And it's a cotton poly blend. So what we did, this is what I'm wearing at the moment, is all our t-shirts now are 220 GSM, 100% cotton. And the vast majority of them are Australian cotton as well. What that means is that it's almost impossible to get through these t-shirts. They're gonna fade with the sun like they should, rather than have holes or to decompose. And kind of the ethos of the brand became that Nautica should be worn in 15 years by someone else.
For those who don't know what greenwashing is, help us understand what it is.
Of course, greenwashing, they're basically claims that will put you into a sustainability bucket, if you will, without giving the full picture. So because you use recycled polyester, for example, doesn't make it necessarily sustainable because polyester doesn't decompose. Or if you use a single percentage of synthetic fiber in your clothes, it makes it unrecyclable. So greenwashing is been used by a lot of brands to look like they adhere to sustainability programs, but unfortunately, at the end of the day, they're not a sustainable practice.
What are some of the challenges with doing this, where you're not part of the head office, but you're licensing the brand? Do you have to fund it yourself? Do you have to get approvals for any designs you come up with? How does the process work when you're licensing?
Yeah, it's quite strict depending on brands, because the idea is that you still need to very much remain true to the brand. We wouldn't be able to start a line of, Speedos, for example. This is not part of our DNA, although we do a lot of swimwear, so maybe there's a business idea there. The approval, I think, comes from establishing trust. So that's first and foremost with the brand principal, for them to know that you have the best interests of the brand at heart, that you really respect their IP, but that you need to have something that's specific to your market. One of the challenges or one of the pitfalls is when you're too close to your market and you completely change who you are to adapt. So a few years ago, we did an advertising campaign that I remember a lot of the high fashion brand became very streetwear focused, and to this day is still obviously the case. But you think of Demna Balenciaga, for example, that completely changed the aesthetic of the brand and went, full streetwear. So we did something similar, but our customer didn't react well.
Okay.
The customer, I think, that we were targeting didn't want to see us that way because they see it as an aspirational brand. And then the aspirational customers didn't really like it because then we looked like a streetwear brand. So, there's always lessons to be taken, and it's how you leverage these. And what happened after this is that we produced our own campaign internally, and we came up with probably the best campaign that we've ever had. And that was shot in Australia, made in Australia, designed and kind of thought here in this office.
And what was in the campaign?
Well, it was my mate's boat in rush cutters, and we were sailing. We were sailing. We had an amazing collection. Someone who worked with us, Drew Richards, loves Nautica archives, and we actually used one of my mate's old jackets as a platform for a capsule that we designed, and then we went on the harbor on like a misty day, and we actually sailed. We were not even, posing or anything like that. We did it. And I think it resonated so much with people because it was authentic.
For sure.
It looked like us. And you can always tell when people have fun doing something.
Yeah.
It just, transcends the image.
Yeah. I have that beef with tennis photos without real tennis players. You can tell, and it's a distraction.
Correct.
Yeah, it's the wrong technique. It's just not the flow.
Yeah.
So I think when you know how to sail, there's a flow to it. Like, so it's a natural.
And not only that, but when I'm on shoot, I specifically ask models to not look pretty. Their model to start with. So, they start with a very high base, and it's like, just do what you're doing. Be worried about the sail or the rope or the water or the horizon, and then the genetic will do the rest.
Oh, the genetics will do the rest. You talk about learning from your customers, things that don't go well. How do you get this feedback? When I meet many business owners, they're iterating their products and testing it.
Yeah.
So in fashion, in clothing, how do you get your feedback from your customers?
Yeah. I'm a data person. My best friend is still an Excel spreadsheet to this day. So what we try to do when it's usually quite a costly exercise, but very, very valuable, and then we do customer survey. So we try to do it every year where we incentivize people to answer a questionnaire. And so that helps us better understand our brand adjacencies, better understand the attitude towards the brand adjacencies. And we do a lot of subjective feedback where people can literally write what they're thinking. And so that's very helpful. We also work with wholesalers. We're exclusive to David Jones department store. So we also have a lot of the data coming from them. And the team and I try to spend as much time as possible on the shop floor to have firsthand feedback from customers as well.
What are some of the lessons from the shop floor?
It's been relatively positive. So that's what was overwhelming in the survey as well. And when we're there, is that people were actually very happy with it. I think we work really, really hard to bring their quality level, which is a very, very high standard for us. And it's been really well received. So, I'm all for constructive criticism, but I can't really tell you too much negative stuff.
What are the challenges, your biggest challenges now, having done this successfully? Like, looking forward, what are the things that you need to overcome?
It's tough out there. It really is. Obviously, I would encourage everyone to subscribe to Inside Retail and Business Insider, the press that specializes in fashion and retail specifically. But we are looking at tremendous shrinkage of retailers who specialize in the high street fashion. So Glue is now pretty much all shut. General Pants is pretty much gone. The Iconic has changed their business model a lot. So they do what we call drop shipment, which is directly from the brand producers. And our biggest challenge right now is retailers. So when we look at the different channels of the business, one of them is direct to customer, which is our website. This is doing really well. It's growing, and we have amazing feedback. And then when we're looking at retailers, the brick-and-mortars, people that we work with, they're finding it difficult. So I would say that for us, for the future, looking at the social macroeconomics that we're seeing at the moment, is to really refocus the business on its core essential, which is for us quality and staying true to the brand, and to weather what's happening at the moment. We've gone through this before. What usually happens in those kind of like crunch times, not wanting to say the word recession, but that's something that's very probable, are the brands who are authentic and who maintain who they are through this are the ones usually come on top at the end. And also what happens is that there's a lot of non-brands that are labels. They usually exit the market during that time. And so when the economy goes back to where it was, there's a bit more room for the people who stayed.
Right. And so what is your advice for a smaller brand earlier on in their journey? What lessons can you pass on to them? A local brand in Australia.
It's tricky. There's two ways to approach it. At the moment, what I'm seeing on the market is that being original doesn't necessarily pay off. There's a lot of copycats and there's a lot of people doing the same thing. Like I said earlier, Australia is a very homogenic market, so you can have a lot of the same, basically, and still have a market share. But we're not America. We're not 350 million people. We're 35 million people. So by doing that, you really eat a small part of the pie. So the recommendation I would have for someone who starts their own label is probably to do the other way around and to be very specific in what they're doing. It's to have an ethos or a Northern Star that I like to call that's their very own, and then not to look too much at what else people are doing. Because when it comes to sticking around with one brand, people are going to always take the OG. And so if you were copying someone, you're going to get disposed of very quickly. If you're original and do your own thing, there's a lot more chance it's going to stick around.
What are your inspirations for when you're coming up with a new collection? What are your favorite brands that you draw on?
Yeah, I don't like to say favorite brands because I don't want to give credit to any other brands but Nautica. But I think it goes back to what I said. It has to be authentic. We are sailing, we're a sailing inspired brand. So it's very easy to, again, look at what our competitors are doing and be like, let's try this or let's do that. But you lose credibility. So we have to stay true to what we're doing and to who we are. I'm very lucky. I have friends who do sail, who have boats, so I get invited frequently. So I can see actually what people are really wearing, what it looks like. We're not a real sailing brand. Let's be honest. We're sailing inspired. When you are doing Sydney to Hobart, you need to have, almost Kevlar vests that can sustain minus 100 degrees. That's not what we're doing. But we still stay very true to the ethos. I'm an 80s baby as well, so I've gone through a full cycle. And to look back is very helpful because I think there's this perception of a life that was very different in the 90s and in the 2000s that current generation looks for. So for us to revisit this and to pull aspects of that time is very helpful at the moment.
Yeah.
So what it looks like, for example, now is that we've changed a lot of the silhouette that we have, which used to be quite narrow and fitted. And it's very easy to see that in the market, that everyone's getting a bit looser and a bit baggier. But that's very much to like how we used to dress 20 years ago. So again, it comes very naturally to us because it's
you lived it.
We lived it, and that's kind of what Nautica was then, rather than trying to create something new that looks like what everyone is doing in the market. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And for listeners who want to learn more or to contact you, what's the best way to reach out?
So very good segue. I talked about my age. I'm not as relevant as I used to be on social media. So we have an amazing team that's spearheaded by Jacinta Baladi, who works in marketing for us, and our graphic designer, Jackson. They put some incredible things on Instagram. I relinquished a lot of decision for this because I'm a bit of a dinosaur, but we were able to create an aesthetic that again is us, but much more sympathetic to our audience. And what we're trying to do too is to keep it as informative as possible. So talk about the garment in an authentic form and to hopefully, educate people a little bit.
Great. Excellent. Thank you very much for your time today.
It was my pleasure.